forgetting to do that. There we go. Okay, so I did not prepare an infographic for tonight's summative session like I did last time. I thought I'm going to record the session, and what I thought to do, I could always just upload some pointers again onto VCLearn, but I know that a lot of you have already started. So I really just want to help you get your mind around these two questions of the summative assignment. Yeah, I must say they do explain things quite well, I must say. No, I'm only joking. It's just in my mind, I need to have it like that for when I mark because it's just easier. So I will definitely still upload something for you. But the two questions in this assignment, or sorry, summative assignment. Yeah, it is an assignment. To me, this is just me, my personal opinion. I think the language and the grammar that they've used in questioning these questions are a little bit all over the show. So what I've decided to do, and I'm hoping that not many of you have well, you probably have made a start, but that what I'm going to say tonight will help you to kind of just wrap it up into a more of a logical whole as opposed to kind of being all over the show. So the first question has to do with the allegory of the cave by Plato, which is described in his work, The Republic. And it's basically just a symbolic representation of the nature of reality and the human condition. And those of you who have engaged with it, maybe watched some YouTube videos on it or read some explanations on it, you will have seen that it's quite obviously a hypothetical scenario, but it's where prisoners are chained in a cave and they can only see shadows on the wall in front of them that has been cast by objects passing on a bridge or a elevated whatever behind them. And these prisoners, basically, this is their sort of been, that's how where they've been their whole lives. So they mistake the shadows for reality because that's kind of all they know, and they've never really experienced anything else. So in the first question, the first part of the question, there's 4 criteria to this question that the rubric speaks to, and I'm going to unpack each criteria, hoping to make a little bit more sense of what each criteria focuses on. So the first criteria focuses on the philosophical elements of this allegory, and they want you that what we want to see as OTs marking this is whether you actually understand these concepts or these elements. So you would have to look at there's a few, but I'm going to kind of list or name the 4, to me, the 4 most important. And remember, this first criteria is out of 10 marks, of which 2 marks are going to be for resources, that you've consulted at least 4 resources. Can I just, as an aside right here before I continue, as much as what I am honored by the fact that some of you are doing this, you please don't use me as a resource in your referencing. You would, whatever I say is from other resources and other information and resources. So you would need to find your own your own 4 resources. Although I am flattered, but yeah, these are definitely not my thoughts and words and ideas. This is just what I've kind of gathered from other reading. It is hard to find resources. I do agree with you, Vanessa, but I think with this particular one, with this allegory of the cave, there's actually quite a lot out there. I must say, I found quite a lot. And if I also have to be, and this stays between the 4 walls of this collab, the 4 cyberspace walls of this collab, sometimes, I don't know if any of you have engaged with, yeah, I understand the academic, what's the word, rigor or the academic soundness of articles is a concern. But with this particular question, this allegory of the cave, there are just so many different interpretations of it that there isn't, I wouldn't say there's any one 100% right. So what I'm going to discuss with you tonight are the core basics, the elements and the concepts that you're going to find in any explanation. But deviations of this, it's not a problem. It's just the way different. Obviously, it's left to interpretation by different people in different ways. And if you don't understand something, and as I say, I'm saying this between the four cyberspace walls of this collab, pop it into ChatGPT and just ask ChatGPT to give you, in layman's terms, what does this actually mean? Sometimes philosophy that helps. But anyway, that's just an aside. So if we have a look at the philosophical concepts then that you need to discuss in criteria 1 of this question, you would have to obviously look at the nature of reality, which is um, the incorrect perception of these prisoners, and the illusions that go with that. You would have to look at the role of the philosopher. You could use the word educator, I suppose, in this sense, where um, the one person, the one prisoner escapes and comes back and enlightens their fellow prisoners. That would be kind of the educator, the philosopher. Um, Again, open to your interpretation. And if you can substantiate and motivate it, I'm happy. And then also you would have to look at the limitations of sensory perception. In other words, the perception can be deceptive, and that, yeah, what we see or what we perceive or what we experience is not necessarily reality or realness. And then the fourth most important element for me or concept for me would be the actual process of enlightenment. So what does that involve? Does it come easily? Is it something you just know? It requires a bit of effort, a bit of research, seeking, etc. So please, I'm not saying that you have to limit your criteria 1 discussion to those 4 concepts. And even if you don't mention them, that is also fine. These are just the 4 basic ones of this allegory. And again, remember, this is really only for 8 marks. So don't write pages and pages on the actual understanding of the allegory. I think the marks for this particular question are allocated more for the analyzing and connecting it with education. So basically what you're going to discuss in this first criteria then is just the distinction between how the world appears, which would be the shadows, and how the world really is, which would be the forms and the objects and the ideas that were behind the wall. And then obviously the role of the philosopher or the educator in the whole process of enlightenment. That's it pretty much in a nutshell. So you would have to go and look those things up and embroider a little bit more on those. The second criteria of this rubric then asks for you to analyze and evaluate the metaphors in this particular allegory. And there are so many. There are really so many. And you can go to town with this. But again, remember, it's only 10 marks. So again, I'm going to mention the most important ones or the basic ones or the ones that stand out the most. Obviously, the cave. Have a look at what the cave represents in terms of either an image or a metaphor. The shadows are obviously a big part of this. So yeah, what does that symbolize? The other one the chains of the prisoners. What does that symbolize? What does that mean? The sun is a big thing. The sun is a big image in this allegory. Obviously, again, the educator or the philosopher. Yeah, those are again the most important. Well, I shouldn't say most important, but the more obvious images and metaphors. There are many. There are many others. There's darkness and the light. The fact that the philosopher or the person who breaks free makes the decision to come back, and how the prisoners react. So those are all images and metaphors that you can use. Moshe, good question. How many? Okay, so again, it's out of 10 marks. So if you're going to choose 5 and you discuss each one, you know, 2 or 3 sentences, I would say that would be sufficient for me. Um, yeah, really don't. Again, you can. I remember from last year, some of the students, they wrote pages on this allegory because once you actually get into it, it's actually, it kind of just flows and you want to analyze everything and you want to connect everything to real life and to modern society. And you can. There is just so, it's so rich with um, symbolism and metaphors. You can, but just bear in mind the mark allocation and what you actually need to discuss. So I would say, yeah, 4 or 5 of the metaphors. Pick 4 or 5, and then just kind of give 2 or 3 explanations or sentences around your evaluation of that metaphor. And then with the third criteria, the third one is the one, yes, that's the one that where you need to talk about the impact of these metaphors on education. So you can decide, you can stick to the exact same 5 that you discussed in criteria 2, and then you can relate them or connect them to education. I know one of the questions, let me just have a look here in this assignment. I seem to remember seeing one of the questions is asking about, oh yes, what are the 4 levels of reality that Plato compares to a line divided into 4 parts? You could bring that into criteria 3. So if you look up the whole meaning of the 4 levels, it basically refers to the way we understand things. So, first of all, it's pretty superficial, and then we understand things a little bit better. It becomes like a belief, kind of, yeah. We start believing it, and then it goes over to reasoning. We start reasoning and understanding it on a deeper level, and then the fourth one, we actually internalize it as knowledge. So that's just, yeah, that. But again, briefly just talk about that line, the metaphor of the line and how that relates to education. And then you could use again 2 or 3 of the metaphors or images that you refer to in criteria 2 to connect them or to um, describe them, I suppose, in relation to education. So um, I'm trying to think of, let's say, for example, you bring in the sun, um, and you want to talk about, you could talk about how, that could be like uh, an awakening from a state of ignorance to maybe one of where light bulbs go on. And I'm being very specific, but I mean, you don't have to be as specific as that. It's just, so again, you can look at themes like the whole liberation, the chains, what it meant for the chains and then no chains. The sun again, as I mentioned. What were the other metaphors? Let me just quickly see. I wrote them down here. Yeah, the shadows. The shadows. You could talk about again the enlightenment, the unveiling of what they understood as being real, but wasn't real. So that could be part of how education works. The process of education is that I don't know, maybe you're in the dark and then you're brought to the light through the unveiling of whatever. Again, it's so it's open to your interpretation and to your experiences and your way of thinking. There's no right or wrong for this question. Neither of the questions actually. It's your interpretation, and it's if the way you've explained a metaphor and you've connected it to education and it makes perfect sense. It's going to be fine for me, really. I was talking to somebody in the week about this philosophy module and saying, it's great, and it's great to maybe just sometimes just trigger some thoughts and some processing that maybe you would not have triggered if you hadn't done this module. But it's not a do or die kind of module. It's not really going to make you a better or a worse lecturer. It's good just to be aware of your belief system when it comes to education, and some of these things kind of just help you to wrap your mind around it. Another thing that you can actually mention in criteria 3, um, speaking about the impact of these metaphors on education, you could also include the shackles of the mind. So he talks about the shackles of the mind, or or shackle the mind, not shackles of the mind. Um, and maybe you could have a look at one or two things in education, and you could be very specific to South African education as to what would constitute a shackle of the mind in our educational system. Um, for this question, I do not expect or require of you to use examples from your own discipline. You can, and it won't be wrong, but um, this is a very kind of like general, generic kind of question. So when it asks also for practical examples, which I think is the fourth criteria, um, you can relate it to any discipline as long as it's tertiary and as long as it kind of like fits in with the metaphors of the allegory. So um, yeah, there again, you are free to use whatever examples. I mean, even if you want to kind of like create your own examples just to fit it in with the whole metaphor, that is absolutely fine. As long as, if you're going to analyze a metaphor and then you're going to explain how this impacts on education or how we can relate it to education, then say, for example, blah, blah, blah. And, that pretty much covers those criteria. And then the last part of that rubric is then just 4 marks I think it's 4 marks, yeah, for your academic writing. Um, with this assignment, I'm going to be a little bit more strict with academic writing. It's only 4 marks for the first question. I do expect a proper introduction and a proper conclusion. Not long, please. It doesn't have to be a long introduction or a long conclusion. Try and refrain from too many bullet points, numbering, tables. Yeah, try and stay away from that. So pure academic writing. I don't expect you to have headings, or you don't need to have headings. If you do, that's also fine. But if you don't, if you can just kind of write in a way that it flows so that it's easy to mark. Um, Please, I'm asking very nicely, because that sometimes yeah, when I have to read a question a few times just to try and find what I'm looking for or marks in it. Yeah, it's time consuming basically. So yeah, just try and make it easy and logical. And if you stick to the rubric, you're going to be absolutely fine. Any questions about this first question before I move on to the second one? No. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention with regards to the impact of the metaphors on education. So the other thing, the fourth thing that you could bring in there is there's a little bit of this allegory that refers to the purpose of education. So basically, it's uh, we're not just transmitting facts and information. We're trying to cultivate critical thinking, philosophical reasoning in some cases, I suppose. But you could bring that in as well. So, you could then again, just to summarize, you can bring in the divided line, the line that's divided into 4 parts. You can bring in shackles of the mind. You can bring in purpose of education, as well as the metaphors. So you don't have to bring in all 4. You can just use 1 or 2, but just to give you a broader kind of like scope of everything that you can discuss with criteria 3. Okay, we all good? Guys are very quiet. Are you shell shocked? Are you good? Thanks, Violet. Thank you, Sonia. Awesome. Okay, it doesn't matter if there's only 2 of you. Frank is good. I know George is good. George will be good. George is always good. Um, there we go. Now we have lots of good people. Okay. Okay. I'm going to, oh, good question, Vanessa. I'm going to make the recording available as soon as it downloads. Sometimes it takes about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I will put it onto the YouTube channel. Alternatively, I could just leave it on Colab. Is that easier? Because I see they only delete it after 2 or 3 days. So I'm happy to leave it on here. Um, And I will definitely on VC Learn, I will type up, okay, I'm going to leave it on the collab for the next 2 or 3 days. And I will type up an infographic for you. I will do that for you because you're also cool. And I'm really going to miss you after tonight. This feels quite weird. Yeah, I did actually mean to do an infographic for tonight, but I've been yeah, so focused on research. I haven't started breathing yet. So, all right, good, 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 good. Amazing students. Let's get you through this module. Yes, Sonia, good question. I will, and I will also email it to Diana. Shame. I hope she's actually all right. I hear she had to go in for an op today, so I hope she's okay. But yes, I will email it to her. I will ask her to put it on your group as well, or sorry, the other group, your group, your group. Sorry, she. Try that again, and I will also upload an infographic. The recording. I will put that on the YouTube channel and I will also email it to Diana so she can put it on your VC Learn group. I'm just thinking because you don't have access to our one. But I will put it out there everywhere. Okay, then when it comes to question 2. So question 2, and you probably, I don't know, maybe you're not going to like me very much after this, but the linking to Plato for question 2's question to me makes absolutely no sense. Because they talk about Plato has he is like he focuses on students that this let me try this again. Gee. That the lecturer is a facilitator rather than students relying solely on the information transmitted. No way. Sorry, I have to totally disagree with that. Plato might have used Socratic questioning, etc., but he was guiding the student to discover the knowledge. I don't think he's. Anyway, as I said, that's my personal opinion. So it's not a problem if you've already done question 2 and you've linked it to Plato. You're not going to lose marks because of that. But I'm hoping for those of you who haven't started or who are confused by having to do that, that this is going to help you. Basically, for me, question 2 is you. First of all, you need to yes, yes, George, totally agree with you. Goodness, I've just lost my train of thought. Oh yes, that's what I want to say. The for the first 5 marks, you are going to tell me or write in your answer. So basically, question 2 is your philosophy. Okay, so that's yeah, that's obvious. But I don't want you to write so much about, how can I say this, the elements of the actual philosophies as opposed to what are your beliefs around what you're doing. So the rubric starts off by asking a little bit about your history, I think. Let me just quickly read this again. The historical perspective. So if you have a look on page 9 of the assignment, there's a whole lot of bullet points at the bottom. So what I've done is I'm going to number them for you to the one to correspond them to the content of the rubric. Hope that makes sense. So the first part of the rubric talks about historical perspective. So the bullet point in that list is where it says what theoretical and practical influences and themes from the past have shaped your beliefs. So you're going to start your essay with that. 5 marks of a little bit about who are you? How did you get to this point? And what is it about your educational experiences that have shaped your teacher identity or lecturer identity as you have it today? Does that make sense? So maybe you had a very kind of like, and I'm giving my own example, was corporal punishment, it was seen and not heard, it was that was our classroom environment. And so my teacher identity started there. And so that definitely has an impact on my philosophy. Obviously, a lot of the things I've worked through, but I need to hear something, just something about your past that has had an effect, either positive or negative, on or impacted your teacher identity today, philosophy. So that's the first one. Then the second part of the rubric talks about the philosophy. So now, your people, and why you have to include all these philosophies, I also do not know. And I have to be honest and say, I don't expect you to include little bits of all of these philosophies. That is insane. I mean, we've done um, classical philosophies, Plato and Aristotle. We've done continental philosophies, which was existentialism, phenomenology, hermeneutics, critical theory, post constructionalism, and we did normative philosophies where we did student centered ones of progressivism and social reconstructionism, and we also did the teacher centered ones, which was essentialism. What else did we do? Perennialism, pragmatism. So, oh, and then we did African philosophy, which is a world philosophy. So we've done so many that I definitely do not expect you to include elements from every single one of those. So for the second part for the second block of this rubric, for 5 marks, I would need to be able to see in your answer that you've definitely included elements from, I don't know, at least 3 of them, 3 to 5 philosophies, and also a title for your philosophy. I know in the information above, it says, please ensure that your philosophy has a title, but nowhere in the rubric do you get a mark for that. I sometimes wonder who sets up these assessments, but anyway, so I would then include that in the second part of the rubric, the 5 mark part, where you have to include principles or elements from some of the philosophies. Please don't do it from all of them. You'll be writing until the end of the year on this. So pick up 2 or 3 philosophies that you gel with, that you feel works with you, and then just pick up some of the elements. And then the third question is, for the third part of the rubric for 5 marks, what is for you the purpose of education? So obviously that's going to start formulating your philosophy. If you think the purpose for education is so that you can get a degree and get a job, that is going to impact your philosophy. If somebody else thinks the purpose of education is to be a mature, effective, functional global citizen, well, then that means that'll affect their philosophy. So that is for 5 marks. The fourth part of this question is, how do you view your students? How do your students learn within your discipline? And what, in your view, is the role of a student? So obviously, while you're discussing all of these things, you are going to be bringing in elements of the different philosophies. I mean, if you're a teacher-centered philosophy person, or student-centered, or you are whatever kind of like focus, if you are more pragmatist orientated or essentialist, whatever, that is going to impact your answer to this question. So if you answer the question, you can then obviously refer to the philosophy. So that's the fourth part. How do you see your students? Um, what is their role for you in education? That's the fourth part. The fifth part of this rubric is your role as the educator. So, how are you going to meet your responsibilities? How are you going to know that education has happened? So, that's for 10 marks. The student role is also for 10 marks. And then the sixth part is what is knowledge for you? That's probably going to be the only tricky part of this question, because you need to have a look at what is knowledge for the particular philosophies that you subscribe to, and then integrate that into your discipline. So, what is knowledge? Is it concrete? Is it based on experiment? Is it based on experiences? Is it based on what is it based on? And what is it? So that is the sixth part. And then the seventh part is where you are awarded 9 marks for example. So obviously in all of this typing of the role of the student, role of the educator, what is knowledge, you're going to be giving examples, and that is for those 9 marks. And then the last point is 6 marks for academic writing. So it's quite a big chunk for academic writing. Sure, I'm exhausted just explaining this question to you, but that's basically what the focus will be on. I know that every point on this rubric refers to Plato, but please, I'm happy for you actually not to use his not to use his name in this essay at all. I hope I'm not going to get into trouble for this. But the point is just, it's not a problem if you have or if you want to. It's not a problem. But for me, Plato's philosophy belongs to the classical philosophies, and things have changed so much over the time of the way that we view education. And you've kind of just dealt with Plato in question one. You kind of want to move on and talk about something else. But having said that, if you link it to Plato, there's nothing, you won't lose marks for that. It's just, I just found that a bit restrictive. So I'm going to go through that again one more time. So first, you're going to look at something. What about you? What has shaped you from something from your past that has shaped you? What theme from your past has shaped you to be the lecturer that you are today? What what philosophies do you subscribe to? What is the title of your philosophy? That would be the second part. The third part is, what do you see as the purpose of education? The fourth one is for 10 marks. The others are all for 5. The fourth one for 10 marks, what is the role of your students? How do you see them playing out in your whole purpose or your lecture room? The fifth one, what is your role as the educator? How do you know that learning is happening? What do you do to ensure that learning happens? What is your view on discipline, management, um, research, all those things, everything that plays a role with being a lecturer? That's the fifth one. The sixth one for 10 marks is, what do you count as knowledge? How do you know? How do you get to knowledge? And then the seventh part is the examples that you're going to obviously interweave with all of your explanations of everything else. So I don't know if that has made your life a bit easier, a little bit clearer. Any question or comment or anything you'd like to add to this conversation? Okay, I'm glad, Sonia. I'm glad. I must say, yeah, I don't know what they did. I have a funny feeling they redid this assignment and forgot to take out Plato stuff. Okay, that's perfect. Does any say how to reference your experiences? No, Frank, no. You know what I normally advise, and it doesn't, you don't have to, but what helps, let's say, for example, you are referring or you are um, narrating a bit about a personal experience, maybe just to put it either in italics or to, what do you call it, where you indent. So you indent it slightly away from the left-hand margin and slightly away from the right-hand margin. So it just becomes like, then it kind of like stands out and you know that's a personal narrative, but you do not have to reference that. That's just personal input. You could, just say personal input, or the fact that you've indented it, then I will know that it's a personal narrative. Any other questions? Is there anybody here who has finished this assignment or done quite a bit of it already? Okay, so you're all going to be starting. Okay, well, then I'm glad I caught you in time. You've done question one. That's fine. Question one is actually quite nice. Frank. Oh goodness. I do feel sorry for the very left brain people who have to do this module. I think philosophy must be very painful for them. But yeah, it's once you get going, it's nice. I think. Oh shame. But you'll be fine. You'll be fine. You just wing it. Use all the right, Vanessa. Use all the right, Vanessa, because you're an IT lecturer, right? If I remember correctly, you just use all the right words and marketing. That's it, marketing. The right words, and as long as you follow the rubric, you'll be fine. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Sonia, and there's somebody who's in. I think there's two people in IT, and I do feel sorry for them. So I think if you're an IT person, this must be torture. Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I have so enjoyed. I know it's you're still out there in cyberspace, and we haven't really actually met, but I've honestly enjoyed engaging with you. Um, Yes, Glenda, good question. What normally happens is Diana and I discuss this before the national sessions so that we're both on the same page. So yes, whatever I have said tonight, she is okay with, and she will be applying the same approach in her marking. So that's all good. That's all good. And I think what we should do, I know you're all busy, but maybe we should have like a little post assignment get together. Maybe we can then all switch our videos on and I don't know, have a glass of wine or something. Once I've done all the marking. I think that's a very good idea. I think we should have a wine night. And yes, we can all toast one another when this is all over. Fantastic. Right. Oh, I see we've only been 40 minutes, but if you guys don't have any questions, then there you go. There you go. Whatever works, eh? Whatever works. As long as it looks like it's in a wine glass. How long after course maybe meet in real life? Long after it's George, once I've retired. Oh goodness. Yeah, we should have a Capetonian reunion. Somewhere in Cape Town, somewhere. Oh, just not in this winter. Alcohol-free beer. There we go. There we go, Frank. Fantastic. I have really enjoyed you guys, and I think my Thursday nights are going to be a little bit boring from now. But from next week, Thursday, I've got marking. So, yeah, make it fun, exciting. And I will, once I've done the marking and I know they've released the marks, then I'm going to, I will put on the group that we have a nice, just a chill evening where we can just chat about whatever, Plato and all these cave people. It's an absolute pleasure. You too. All have a wonderful evening. And yeah, as I say, I'm going to miss you. And I'm glad I made it a little bit more understandable. That's definitely then my aim, as I know it can be a bit grey. But thank you all for your questions, and I do appreciate the work that you put in for your assignments. I really do, because I know it's hard, and I know you're super busy, lots on your plate. So thank you very much for the effort that you put in. It is appreciated that you don't give me hogwash to mark. Awesome. Yes, very bittersweet. You want it to end, you want to get on with your life, but yeah, this has been good. But look forward to reading your assignments. All the best. Have a super weekend. If you've got rain and cold and you're like us in Cape Town, please stay warm and go and have a nice cup of hot chocolate or something now. Absolute pleasure, all of you. Have a good evening further. Yes, happy writing. Cheers. Firefox works, George. I'm really happy for you. Thank you for sharing that with me.